Hello and welcome to episode number 51 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and I don't know if you watched Game 5 last night, but we've got a ton to talk about today. But before we do that, the social media plug is in order. Please follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. If you want to follow my personal Twitter, it's at Chelney Andrew. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means more to me than I can put into words. And as an incentive, I will give you a shout out on social media on the podcast if you do so. Every time you like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, etc. It makes me feel great. It helps the show out too. Unless Chipotle or the local sushi place wants to sponsor me, because I've given them more of my business over the years that I am willing to admit, I don't make any money off the podcast. This is done out of love in my spare time. So when I see a new rating or review, a share, or whatever else, I get this big goofy grin that won't leave my face. So please do that if you haven't already. Also, Chel Squared is part of National Podcast Network, a new network dedicated to NHL podcasts. Check the show out there by going to nationalpodcast.network/Chel Squared. And though I am a SiriusXM employee, this podcast is not affiliated in any way with the company. The opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect the views of SiriusXM. If you're angry at my takes, direct them to me and me alone, please and thank you. Game 5 in the books, and oh boy, there's a lot to dissect here. The Blues have now won both games since being demolished 7-2 at home in Game 3. Some people, maybe rightfully so, are putting an asterisk next to their Game 5 win, though, the game winner coming at the hands of a blatant missed tripping call in the third period. But let's say the penalty was called and it's still 1-0. We'll never know. But who's to say Boston's abysmal power play last night would have finally gotten it going? Bruce Cassidy said it best in the presser after the game, though, calling the officiating in Game 5 a black eye and said it was egregious. And he's right. But his team also didn't play well for almost the entire game. Shot totals would suggest otherwise. Bruins led the game 39-21, but anyone watching that game saw the Bruins generate very little offense, and both the team and the fans, visibly and audibly, got frustrated quickly. Someone maybe should have told Chara to take the game off if that was the kind of game his team was going to give. I mean, I don't know, but too little, too late for that. We'll get into all of that, the poll question, and a whole lot more. Two guests on this week. Joining Chel Square for the first part of the show is Bruins reporter for Bruins Daily and production assistant for NBC Sports Boston, Matt Castle. Matt, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Doing good. Great to be here.
Before we get into everything else, take me through what because you were in attendance. You were at TD Garden last night. Take me through that play in the third period, the tripping call. It was a clear trip, right? I feel like you can't dispute that if you're a Bruins fan, if you're a Blues fan, if you're a fan of any other team in the league, probably can't dispute that was a trip that was blatantly missed. Take me through that play, what you saw there that led to the goal being scored to make it 2-0 St. Louis, and the following shifts after that.
So that play was actually down in our end that I was at. The Bruins obviously fighting and clawing their way back, down 1-0 in a close game. They're breaking the puck out, and Achari goes to turn up ice. And at first, I immediately thought it was a trip, but I was more concerned that the way he landed, he hit his head. Like, he smashed his head on the ground, so I was like, oh, wow, Achari's going to be messed up, maybe a concussion. But then everything happened so fast after that. It was just like they tripped Achari 2-on-1, and then the goal was absolute garbage. I don't know what Tuukka was doing, kind of like hit off his paddle through his legs. It was just a mess, complete mess. And then on like further review, it was the most clear trip of all time. I mean, how do you like show that to a ref? Like, they even reviewed it, I think. Like, I don't know how that guy is NHL official, gets paid. I don't know how much they get paid, but pretty handsomely, I'm assuming, and sees that and is like, that's not a trip. That's like, hey, go to ref school one time. But regardless, it was just, like Bruce Cassidy says, a black eye. I mean, you can't have, if you're the NHL, the Stanley Cup final is your Super Bowl. Like, you can't have that on the biggest stage. You just can't have that.
And you're right. It's obviously I don't have a horse in this race as a Rangers fan. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Bruins, but at the same time, you take a look at that play and you think the Bruins definitely got. They did not get a call there that they should have, definitely. But that play should have been called a trip, but it wasn't, and yet it seemed like the Bruins players on the ice thought it was going to be, or at least were expecting one, rightfully so, but they were expecting it, and none was called, and yet it seemed like they kind of stopped skating. It almost seemed like they gave up on the play because they were all looking at the trip and thought there was going to be a call, but there was none being called, and then soon after the Blues made it 2-0. So what did you see from the players out there on the ice in the Bruins jerseys?
Well, I think you got to start with Bozak in the Blues jersey. I think he knew he was going to get called for something.
Absolutely.
He stopped skating, and that's what Bruce Cassidy said. He was like, their guy was already heading to the box. And then the Bruins kind of were like in slow motion, kind of in shock. And then it was bang, bang. Tuukka after the game said like everyone thought it was a trip, and then everything just unraveled so fast because they were kind of caught up in the whole thing. And yeah, it just was a really bad play all around. And not to say the Bruins would win that game if that wasn't called, but you got to think like, making it a 2-goal game makes it almost impossible, whereas a 1-goal game is just like in the third period is attainable.
Yeah, I mean, and the Bruins scored to make it 2-1 late in the third period, right? And then you think, okay, well, here we go. This is going to be a game, and then obviously no one scores after that, and the game ends at 2-1, and that controversial non-call ends up being the game winner. What has to change? Obviously, the officiating probably has to change. I mean, this is what surprises me. I mean, I don't know if it should surprise me or you or anybody at this point, but the officiating in the NHL is not good. This is not breaking news or anything, but the officiating not great. This is the Stanley Cup final, right? You would think that this is a whole new level of, hey, like, let's figure this out. These are the best referees that we could put on the ice in the entire sport. This is it. This is the best of the best. And if the best of the best are missing calls like that, it is a huge problem for the sport of hockey.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think they're going to have a long offseason to really address this issue. I mean, there's got to be a better way to see that. I mean, the what makes it worse is like, the officials, they're human beings and they miss calls, and you're not going to get it all 100% correct. But the calls they missed last night were right in front of the ref. It was clear as day. It was like the hit on Johansson that is getting looked at by the league today. That was right in front of the ref. Crew got elbowed in the face right in front of the ref. The holding call that they almost scored on, where David Krejci came across, which was badass, by the way, and made the save.
Absolutely.
And then if you see a graphic of the Achari play, it like the ref could not have been in any better spot to make that call. So I mean, the only other thing you could do other than like maybe put like a ref up in the press box that gives you like a bird's eye view and is like it can phone down and be like, hey, that was just clear as day, because like the refs are caught up and it's such a fast paced game. But I don't know what else like you can do. I mean, they reviewed it too. It just makes no sense.
Well, let's say the Bruins got a power play on that call, right? There were 0 for 3 to begin with, and those 3 power plays. You were there. You saw it better than I did. But those power plays were abysmal. They were terrible. They got a fat nothing going on offensively, and for stretches, I think they got booed out there on the power play. So even if they did get on the power play, who's to say that it would have been any better than the previous 3? This has been a power play that has been dominant for the last few games or so. I think they scored a power play goal. What was it, 7 straight early on in the series, and yet it seemed like this power play I don't know what was going on, or maybe just holding the stick too tight, or what was going on. But there was no sort of momentum. There was nothing gained by Boston by going on those power plays. So even if they did go on a fourth power play, who's to say that they would have done anything with that one? Well, what has to change for the Bruins on the man advantage for them to get back to their scoring ways?
Well, first, I think the biggest gripe was I don't think people were thinking they're going to score on the power play because, I mean, they finished 0 for 5. I think the biggest gripe was taking a goal off the board for St. Louis because, like I said, makes it 2 goals is pretty much like Mount Everest when you're in the third period of the Stanley Cup final. But yeah, it was tough. It's hard to imagine that this is the same power play that went 4 for 4 in Game 3 and put up 7 total on the game. Yeah, they were god awful last night on the power play. It took them so long to set up. Like it's like for a few of them, it took them over a minute just to get in the zone. Weren't getting clean entries, and then I think the one thing that St. Louis has been doing great was they've been setting up in like this diamond formation that it really sets it blocks off those patented one timers that we see from Pasternak or like Marchand on the wings, and that's where Boston's in business when Pasternak's teeing them up from the left circle. That's how they score all year. That's just bread and butter. Sun will rise. Pasta's going to shoot from the left circle, but they've been blocking that off, so they've had problems. They've had to go down low, and it's just not been there. And, of course, Binnington, got to give it to him, stopped, 38 shots last night?
Yep.
Played really well. There was a few that could have gone in. There was, like, a few that, like, trickled by, and he was just on his back. There was a few close calls, break a puck here and there, and it might have been a different game. But, yeah, credit to St. Louis for shutting it down. I think here's another this is not really like a hockey insider thing. I think it's just your eye test. Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, you need more out of them. They got nothing from them, not even just on the power play total last night. But they have shown in this postseason they're resilient and they show up when it matters most. When they had to go to Game 6 in Toronto facing elimination in the first round, they showed up. Same with Game 7. So I don't think this series is done yet, but if they don't show up, it's probably over in 6.
And I have notes on this, actually. I was going to bring this up to you, but you brought it up first. In this series, the top lines, Marchand has 1 goal and 3 points. Bergeron has 1 goal and 4 points. Pasternak has 1 goal and 2 points. Counter that with St. Louis's top line of O'Reilly, who has 3 goals and 6 points. Tarasenko with 3 goals and Schwartz with 2 assists. O'Reilly's seemingly unstoppable in these games. Hey, he's dominating the ice seemingly every time he's out there, and there seems to be no counter to the way that he's playing the game. What does Boston have to do defensively to stop a guy like Ryan O'Reilly from being such a powerhouse for his team?
I think it starts with getting the defense right. All 3 of the games that the Bruins have lost, their defense has either been depleted or diminished. So Game 2, they lost Grzelcyk and they were down to 5 men, and it just exhausted them. Same thing with Game 4, with Chara going out. They had so for both of those in Game 1, they were without Grzelcyk for 40 minutes. And St. Louis, they are a physical team and they'll wear you down if you have your full onslaught of people. They only had 5 for both Games 2 and 4. And then last night, Chara shouldn't have played. It was awesome. It was cool to see, and it would have been an all-time moment. It was kind of overshadowed by the officiating, but yeah, I don't think he should have played. You get Kampfer and Moore in there. It starts with your defense, and then throwing bodies at them. Got to be physical. Got to match the intensity, and then I think quick breakouts, getting the pressure off, and that'll slow down their forecheck, and that's. Once the St. Louis Blues get in deep and establish their forecheck, that's when that O'Reilly goal last night was the Blues were in deep and he cut in front of the net. They had a nice between the legs no look pass right to him, roofs it, 1-0.
What a great pass by Zach Sanford, by the way. I mean that was a beauty.
That was incredible. But so I think it's a full team effort. Starts with the defense, and then if the offense can get going too, best defense is a good offense. If you just keep it in their zone, they're not going to score on you. But easier said than done. Yeah, so it's going to take a full team effort. That line has been great. I don't think they're better than the Bergeron line, like individually talented, but they've outplayed them for sure. Absolutely. And yeah, big difference in the series is that the top line for the Bruins has been a no-show for the most part, which has kind of been a weird thing for most of the playoffs because they've been such a dominant team top line in the regular season. That line in one from Colorado with Landeskog, McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen. So, yeah, they got to step up, and I think they will. I really do.
Well, this brings me to my poll question for this week, which was, who's your pick to win the Conn Smythe Trophy? This got over 450 votes, and the 4 choices were Ryan O'Reilly, Jordan Binnington, Tuukka Rask, or Brad Marchand. Now, I feel like some of the voting here is skewed because the Bruins are down. If the Bruins were up or we were heading into Game 5 tonight or what have you, I feel like the results would have been a little different. But because St. Louis won, the results may have been skewed a little bit. But of these 4, in your opinion, Matt, which of these 4, or if you have a different name in mind that I again, Twitter only gives me 4 options. So if there's another name that you think deserves a Conn Smythe that I haven't listed in the poll, let me know. But which of these 4 or insert name here do you think should be the favorite to win the Conn Smythe?
Well, I think you got to do it for the winning team, right? I mean, it'd be tough to give the MVP to the losing team, but
it's been done.
Yeah, I would say Tuukka Rask has got to be the front runner for Boston. Easy money. He's been lights out this postseason, and I know the Bruins are down 3-2, but it's not a lot of it has been his fault. I think the games they've lost have been close ones, and there was not a ton he could do on the goals last night, and he's put up Tim Thomas-esque numbers so far this postseason. So I'd say he's in the leader spot for the Bruins. For the Blues, I would say Binnington, but also Tarasenko has been a beast.
Yeah.
Absolute beast this postseason. He's really come on in this the conference finals, and then he showed up in the Stanley Cup. So I'd say those 2, gun to head, if I had to choose one, I would go Tuukka Rask, win or lose, just because he's been incredible. But I don't think they'll give it to Rask if the Bruins lose.
And I would have to agree. Rask is playing so well. 937 save percentage. For a goaltender to have that kind of number, and 1, be down in a series, and 2, if they lose, to have that save percentage and not win the cup would be wild. And to again giving the Conn Smythe, which is the playoffs MVP, to the losing team's player it's rare. It hasn't been done in a while, but it has happened. But the thing with the Blues is you got the story, right? You have Binnington, who's obviously carried his team from January to this point, and he's been playing well for the most part. Game 3 did not play well. That's to put it lightly. And the Bruins have seemingly figured him out, right? You're shooting 5-hole, which is his biggest weakness, and you've found success with his shooting 5-hole, giving up rebounds, putting those in, or just beating him clean 5-hole or what have you. You have found a way to beat him, and yet the Blues have countered that and have figured out a way to win games despite that. Now, the Binnington is leading the poll with 48% of the vote. Ryan O'Reilly second with 34%. Tuukka Rask third with 18%. Now, one thing that really interests me is that Brad Marchand has 0% of the vote. 0, which I didn't expect, right? Brad Marchand was playing super well, except with the exception of a couple of games in these finals. But for the most part, right, Conn Smythe is given out for the entire playoff race. It's not given out for the final. So I was kind of surprised that Brad Marchand is taking 0% of this vote so far.
I think your poll is suffering heavily from recency bias.
Absolutely.
And from people not being that intelligent. there's some not so bright people online, so they might just be thinking MVP of this series and not the totality of the playoffs. So yeah, I think Brad Marchand getting nothing is based solely off his performance in the finals, and I think Ryan O'Reilly getting a lot of his points are from these finals because I mean he's been great, but like I said, I would say Tarasenko has been arguably better this postseason for them.
Yeah, and again, Twitter only gives me four options. So if I could put Tarasenko and other, I could have put Charlie Coyle on there because Charlie Coyle has 9 goals. He's been one of the most consistent scorers for Boston in this whole run. But if I would have put, I feared that if I put Charlie Coyle on there, that he would have gotten 0% of the vote because he's not a big name like Marchand. So I figured, okay, well, let's put Marchand on there to counter the big name in Ryan O'Reilly, see if he'll get some votes. But apparently it backfired on me super badly because Brad Marchand is apparently not getting a single vote for Conn Smythe, which I don't think is right. You have to look at the big picture here. He's been scoreless in a couple of games in the final, but you take a look at the way he's been playing in this whole run, and you think this guy probably deserves maybe some credit, maybe more than 0. But you're right. The internet suffers from real bad recency bias, and it's showing. This is if you're given a class on recency bias, well then take a screenshot of this poll because here's prime example number 1.
Yeah, I love that Coyle pick, by the way. Charlie Coyle from Weymouth, Massachusetts, local kid. He's living out every New England kid's dream. Like, if I could play for the Bruins right now and score 1,000,000 goals in the playoffs, that's what he's doing. That's awesome. He's got to be one of the best mid-season or trade deadline pickups they've ever had. Everyone was kind of skeptical because they gave up Ryan Donato, who was a big time prospect, and didn't know what we're going to get from Charlie Coyle. But he's really turned out to be a great two-way center, and he's sparked that third line. And they've been putting up more offense than the top line has. It's been crazy, and the crowd goes nuts when the local kid Charlie Coyle scores. So that's always great.
What is the problem with Jake DeBrusk right now? It seems like he is playing some of the worst hockey that he's played in his entire career, and that's been echoed by a lot of Bruins fans on social media as well. There's either something wrong with him physically, or maybe he's caught up in the moment a little bit, but it seems like everything has come to a screeching halt with Jake DeBrusk, which leads to a screeching halt in the rest of his line with Krejci and David Backes. What's going on? What is the issue that you have seen out of Jake DeBrusk on the ice?
So Jake DeBrusk is one of the hottest and coldest players at the same time, and it's baffling because there was a stretch in early January where he didn't tally a point for like 13 games, but then like the next 10 games he scored like almost every single game. It was crazy. Once he gets hot, he can't stop. But I think his problem is last night he didn't have a consistent right winger with them because they took David Backes out of the lineup. But in totality, I think his problem is that I don't know, his line's just really not clicking. And he's a guy that works downhill, and that once like the Blues get really physical with him at the point of attack, it doesn't allow him to use his speed and get downhill and crash towards the net, where he usually scores all of his goals. The first game, he had a breakaway and almost scored. And I think if he broke through that with that goal, it would have like really sparked something. And he scored one last night. It was a nice laser slap shot, so that was cool. Hopefully it gives him a lot of confidence moving forward. But yeah, he's a streaky player. And he's right now in the midst of one of the biggest cold streaks of his career, and it couldn't come at a worse time. So hopefully that goal sparks something in him.
For Game 6, this is obviously this is do or die, cup in the building. What does Boston have to do to win this game? They've won in St. Louis pretty big in Game 3, and then St. Louis tied it up in Game 4. How can Boston replicate their Game 3 performance?
I think starts with the veteran leadership. They got to really button down the hatches, and they got to come out firing. The starts are what do it for the Bruins. If they get down early, they don't win usually. So it starts with a great start, and they got to be physical, and they got to bring that same energy they brought in the first period of last night's game. They were cooking St. Louis early. I think they were out shooting them like 13-2, and they were all over them. They just couldn't score. They need to bring that, but for 60 minutes the entire time. Once they kind of dropped in the intensity and kind of let St. Louis get a hold, and then that's when stuff like the Achari thing, that was such a big deal because the Bruins were already down 1-0. Whereas, say, if they were up or if they were tied, then you're down a goal or you're even. So they need to get the lead first. And like I said, it's do or die. The Boston Bruins can no longer afford any losses in the 2019 season. They got to play like it's no tomorrow. Like 60 minutes, they got to bring everything. And it's got to be whoever's healthy. Like Chara, if that's like what he's going to bring, you got to sit him out. If Grzelcyk's not 100%, you got to sit him out. Healthy bodies, fresh legs, and just full tilt. Do or die. This is what you live for. Back against the wall, you're in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. You got to bring it.
You do live for. I mean, everyone that loves hockey or has loved hockey growing up. I mean, Game 6 of the Finals, Game 7 of the Finals. This is what you dream, right? This is what you wish to play in one day. These are the moments that everyone wants to be in. If you're a fan of the sport, or if any sport, if you're a basketball fan, to be playing in Game 4 tonight in the championship final, that would be a dream come true as well. So there's a lot of things going on right now. But for St. Louis, they're seemingly getting some calls here. Not even just the Bozak trip, but they've gotten a couple of hits that the refs have kind of looked the other way on. Barbashev, it was announced earlier today, he's going to get a hearing for his hit on Mojo last night. There's after Craig Berube's comments in Game 3, they kind of seemed like the calls were now being favored towards St. Louis, but at the end of the day, I think overall the officiating was awful for both sides. I think Boston got away with a couple of calls. I think St. Louis probably got away with one or two more calls, but both teams at the end of the day got away with calls. So this officiating, again, like I said earlier, if this is the best, we got a problem. But it's not a good look. You said it perfectly. Like, this is the Super Bowl. This is the NHL Super Bowl, and yet to let this kind of thing happen in the Super Bowl is not great. It's one of those things that it is either as bad or maybe even worse than the no pass interference call that we saw right before the Super Bowl this year. It was bad. These non-calls are not good. They're terrible for the league. And as Bruce Cassidy said in the presser last night, you were there. It's not good. It's a black eye, and it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, that presser last night, by the way, was absolutely electric. Bruce Cassidy. So quick story, quick aside. I was leaving the Bruins locker room to go see Bruce Cassidy at the podium. As I was leaving the locker room, Bruce Cassidy exits the locker room right behind me through like a side door, and I caught like the tail end of his conversation with I forget which assistant coach it was. He's like, "Let's tell it how it like effing is," or whatever. And I was like, "Oh, he is pissed." I knew he was going to be upset. But then, so I was walking to the podium, and Bruce Cassidy's just like seething behind me the whole time. I could just like feel it on him. I was like, "Oh my god!" And then we got in there, and he was letting them have it. He was like, "They're like, what was the mood on the bench?" He's like, "The mood on the bench was you missed an effing call. Like, what do you want from me?" But yeah, he went full scorched earth, and it was electric to see.
And he's not going to get fined for it either, which is the right thing to do. You can't fine a coach, right? Which if they would have fined him, then that would have been a whole separate issue. But I'm glad they didn't fine him, because, hey, I feel like the NHL knows, like, hey, that should have been a call. We didn't call it. Let him say what he has to say, because if we don't, it's only going to backfire on us if we punish him for calling out that was a missed call. So I'm glad the NHL did something right in this particular situation and said, hey, just leave him alone, because he's right. There's no reason that shouldn't have been a call. It wasn't a call on the ice, even though it should have been. Let him do what he wants to do, because if he doesn't, well, that's going to be worse for us in the end, if we fine him or do whatever else that that could have been done. So I'm glad they just kind of sat back and were like, all right, well, we'll let him have this one because he's right.
Yeah, I also think that with this whole uproar, Game 6 might be the tightest officiated game in the history of the NHL, because they have to do something. If they come out in Game 6 and that's the same mockery that they trot out, people are going to stop watching it. I'm going to stop watching it. And I cover the Bruins, but it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. They have to do something. And I think Berube definitely influenced things from Game 3. And then last night he said that he's not here to judge the officials, which I thought was
rich.
Yeah, which I thought was funny. But yeah, Game 6, I think they're really going to batten down the hatches, or at least I hope. I have hope in the NHL still.
You're optimistic, and that's that's more than I could say for a lot of the fans that were watching Game 5. And I tweeted out during the game last night, I was like, this is probably the worst officiated series in the history of the NHL. There was bodies flying everywhere. Everyone's hitting heads. Everyone's tripping. Everyone's holding sticks, elbowing. Holding. They're doing everything, and yet there was 4 penalties called last game. Can we figure it out? Can we get it? Can we, as an organization, can we figure it out and decide, hey, this is not okay. We probably shouldn't. I get it, right? This is the final. You gotta let some things go, I guess. If that's your mentality, then I guess that's what you want to do. But yeah, you can't be letting all this stuff go, especially the trip. I mean, that's all. We talked about it. It's not a good look. Anyways, Matt, super appreciate you coming on. Plug your social media. Plug where people can read your stuff. Super appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's always good talking about the Bruins and venting about the officiating. But regardless. My Twitter is at Matt_Castle22, and you can read my stuff on Bruins Daily and Boston.com. And yeah, we'll see you for Game 7 at TD Garden.
Wow, Matt Castle with the prediction, with the Messier-like will win tonight statement. Big if true. Matt.
I hope.
For the Bruins, yeah, for Bruins fans, I mean, if there's any sort of hockey gods up there in the skies watching the game, then redemption, Game 7 potentially. But we'll see on Sunday. I tweeted out that it was going to be on Saturday, which it was a long day. Sorry, it was a long day. That I said the Game 6 was tomorrow, which it's not. It's Sunday, so apologies for that. This is why Twitter needs an edit button. Can we figure it out? Twitter, please. Jeez. But yeah, Matt, super appreciate you coming on. Talk to you again real soon.
Yeah, take it easy.
Joining Chel Squared for the second half of the show, and writer and founder of Respect the Note, Joey Palazzola. Josh Hyman hopped on last week, loved his takes. Now we have another member of Respect the Note on the show. Before we get to the Cup final, though, here you have some big news to announce, Joey. Let's hear it.
First off, thanks for having me on, Andrew.
Of course.
It's been in the works for about 4.5, going on 5 years now. I'd say 2 years ago, I've been getting a big storm of all my followers wanting one thing, and that was just to make a podcast. And we finally got the group together, and we're gonna go for it. So we got a podcast coming out here soon in the next couple weeks. It's gonna be called the Blue World Order. So pretty excited about that.
I talked about it with Josh last week. I mean, that name, I love it. That's an all-timer. That's an all-time name. I love I love everything about that name.
Yeah, it's a good name because there's a little bit of like context to it in a way, because we're all younger guys trying to find our way through this business, So like the New World Order in the wrestling world, they came in, they conquered, and blah blah blah. The story there. So it's got a little bit of context to it. So we're excited and we're ready to get going.
Absolutely. Well, I just finished a conversation with Matt Castle, and we collectively trashed the overall officiating performance of Game 5 and in the entire series. But now I want your take on the infamous play. Bozak with the trip, ref looking right at it, no call. Blues then score to make it 2-0. Well, I got Matt's take. Hey, what did you see?
I saw a clear trip. That was 100% a trip, no doubt about it. I understand the ref's point of view, missing it in real time, and I do think I heard this on NHL Network Radio earlier. I forgot who was talking about it, but Kelly Sunderland, the ref, he kind of hesitated in a way, because whoever was talking about it was saying that Achari kind of not really embellished it, because he obviously got tripped. There was no doubt about it, but the fact that he was staying on the ground and so on and so forth, whoever was talking about it on NHL Network Radio was kind of saying that could have bought into the ref's thoughts on that play, which I'm kind of iffy on that. But there's no doubt about that. That was 100% a missed call. But we've been there on that side, so kind of time for a break for the Blues on that one.
Well, the Sharks and the hand pass. That's I guess if you're looking at it in a karma way, that you got the bad end of the stick there, and now you're getting the call back. For Bruins fans, not great. It's not.
Also,
not great.
I will point this out. But speaking of the karma thing that you just talked about, that was obviously in the Western Conference Final with the hand pass, and we all know what happened after that for karma to resolve that situation. But going back to Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, I believe it was, the Bruins were on a power play. And I forgot which call specifically it was, but it was a soft call. It was one of the first calls of the series. It might have been the Robert Thomas hook that was very iffy, very weak call. And that ensuing power play, the Bruins had 6 men on the ice whenever they scored their power play goal.
That's right. Yeah.
It was either to take the lead or to go up 2, or it was something like that, but it was a big deal. But hey, karma, like you said, it was definitely a missed call on that Bozak chip on Achari, though, for sure.
And there was also another missed call that would have been the story if a goal was scored on the ensuing play. Dying seconds, second period, 15 seconds left. Puck comes in the Bruins zone. Oscar Sundqvist, right, holding Torrey Krug's right arm down on the ice for about 3-4 seconds, and then meanwhile, chaos ensues in front of the net. Pietrangelo has a wide open net. Rask is on the ice trying to scramble back. He has a wide open 4x6 to shoot at. David Krejci comes storming in and does his best Tuukka Rask impression, blocking the shot, blocking what would have been a surefire goal to prevent the 2-0 lead heading into the third period. Now, that was another missed call that the Bruins should have had a power play on. And another one that didn't lead to a scoring opportunity was Sundqvist's high hit on Marcus Johansson that he didn't get a call on, but the NHL announced today that he's going to get a hearing for that hit. Now, if he was penalized for that play, I don't think there would have been a hearing, but because the referees missed that call, I think he's going to get Game 6 as a suspension. I don't think he's going to play in Game 6. I would be shocked if he got 2 games for that, but I do think as retaliation for not sitting in the box for that penalty, I think the NHL is gonna make him sit up in the rafters for Game 6.
Yeah, that's a big sequence right there. But to start off, let's flash back to that end of the second period, like you were talking about. The hold on, I think it was Torrey Krug. It was on the left inboards from Oscar Sundqvist. He was holding him down on a 50-50 puck. It was about 2-3 feet away from the two players, and Sundqvist was holding Krug to where he couldn't obviously get to the puck. And a Blues player ended up obviously picking the puck up, and then we all know what happens after that. Puck comes out to Pietrangelo, empty net basically, and Krejci makes the craziest save of the series so far. And that's another missed call right there by the refs. That one, I had to look back at it. You reminded me about it, but real time watching the game, they kind of got missed. But like you said, it kind of gets glossed over because of the fact that there was no goal on the play. But that was definitely a missed call again. So that's 2 right there in that game. And then if you want to call it a third on the Barbashev hit on Johansson, that's technically 3 missed calls right there. I did see some people tweet at me some videos of that Barbashev hit, kind of not in slow-mo, but like slower versions of it, And if when you slow it down, it's harder to see if it's shoulder to shoulder and then it gets to the head. But it's just so tough to tell because Johansson changes his level. So it's just such a bang play by the official. But I think I would agree with you on the suspension. I don't think there would be a hearing if there wasn't going to be a suspension. So I think Barbashev is going to sit Game 6, which obviously flashback to Game 3 of the Cup final. Sundqvist was out with the suspension, and look how that affected the Blues. Just a typical fourth liner, and then bam, they get pounded in Game 3. A loss of Barbashev would be pretty much the same way. He practically plays the same role as Sundqvist. He's fourth line energy player. He's actually one of the leading hitters, him and Braden Shin. I believe Barbashev and Shin both had 6 hits in Game 5, and then Barbashev had 9 hits in Game 4. So he's out there creating energy, banging bodies around. So that's going to be a big loss for the Blues, especially on the penalty kill, which we saw with Oscar Sundqvist in Game 3. And that's when the Bruins obviously picked apart the Blues. It was on those power plays without their top pairing guys of Barbashev and Sundqvist, who are actually paired together, coincidentally. So, yeah, that'd be a big loss for the Blues, even though it's a fourth-line player.
Well, let's revisit the Bruins power play. They were 4 for 4 in Game 3, absolutely blitzed the Blues in every way possible. But in last night's game, they were 0 for 3, and they looked terrible. They looked awful. And who's to say, I talked about this with Matt earlier, who's to say that if the Bozak trip was called, if the Barbashev hit was called, who's to say that Boston wouldn't have just continued the mediocre play on the power play that they had all night anyway? Obviously, these plays should have been called for penalties. No one, right. I feel like at least most people shouldn't be arguing that. But even if they did get power plays, would Boston have scored anyway? Looking at how they played with the man advantage in Game 5, they were pretty bad. I mean, even the fans got on them at one point. They were frustrated, both visibly and audibly. They were frustrated with the way the Bruins are playing on the ice, whether it be on the man advantage or 5-on-5. For long stretches of that game, the Bruins couldn't do anything, but that shouldn't take away from the pretty terrible officiating that we've seen in Game 5 and in the Cup final and in the playoffs as a whole. Bruce Cassidy said after the game that it was a black eye, the officiating was a black eye on the league, and it was egregious, and he's right. I mean, and we talked about this with Matt earlier, and I talked about it with you right before we started the show here, is that there's a good reason why the NHL didn't fine him for that, and that's because they know he's right. If they saw that, I would very much assume that they watched Game 5 and they know that he's right. Those calls should have been called. Those plays that weren't, for whatever ridiculous reason that they weren't. These calls should have been made, and yet they weren't. And Bruce Cassidy aired it out in his presser. And the NHL knows that he's in the right. And even I feel like if they knew that, if they would have done something about it, right? If they would have either said something publicly or fined him or do whatever else, that would have looked even worse for the NHL, right? That would have backfired on them immediately, and that would have helped nobody. So I think the NHL looked at that and said, hey, Bruce is right here. if we do something, it'll only make us look worse. Let him say whatever he needs to say. Let him air it out, and then we'll get to Game 6 and we'll go from there.
Yeah, like you said, you never know what the Bruins could have done on those missed calls that would have led to power plays. Obviously, that power play is, no matter how well they contained it, that power play is dangerous. That's definitely that's a strong point of their offense. That's how they get their goals, is on the power play. And so who knows what would have happened on those ensuing power plays. But like you said, the Blues have been making some adjustments to their penalty kill, in which they're tightening up a lot more, especially on the zone entries of the Bruins. I saw this again in the Sharks series, I believe, when San Jose was absolutely picking us apart on the power play, I believe, very early in the series. And the Blues made adjustments to where they were tightening up on the blue line against the zone entries of the Sharks. And so they had a 2-3 game span where they're looking really good on the penalty kill. And then I think the Sharks kind of start to figure it out, getting a lot higher quality scoring chances and such on the power play, because what they were doing is dumping and chasing on the power play. I mean, I know it sucks whenever you see that, but that's playoff hockey. You got to get that puck in there. You got to grind. You got to get to the dirty areas and then use your extra man for an advantage. But I believe we'll see the Bruins do that more often in Game 6 here in St. Louis on the power play, because their zone entries were looking horrible on the power play in Game 4 or 5, I guess you would say now. But that's definitely a huge reason of the success of the Blues penalty kill now, is the overall structure of the penalty kill is so much better. And also, let's not overshine this, Jordan Bennington has been the best penalty killer on the Blues, hands down. I mean, he's got to be. He's your goalie. But he hasn't been Jordan Bennington in this entire series overall. I'll be completely honest about that. He's let in a couple of soft ones. His rebound control in, I believe, Game 3 and 4 were just all over the place. And the Blues pretty much won Game 4 pretty well, obviously. And he was still giving up rebounds left and right. But we saw in Game 5 that, man, he wasn't letting anything up. So that's definitely a big plus for the penalty kill. And obviously the 5-on-5 play of the Blues, that's their strength of their team. Their 5-on-5 play is absolutely amazing. I've been saying it all year long, but I wanted to wait until the Cup final to see against Boston, because the Bruins and Blues are very similar, in my opinion, as in their style of play and such. And I wanted to see what their depth, especially their depth, like the fourth line and such, who is going to be better team 5-on-5. And it's head and shoulders. It's the Blues, like no doubt about it.
Well, one thing that the Bruins have done well in this series is pick apart Binnington's weakness, and that's his 5-hole. They've been shooting at it pretty much constantly ever since they sort of figured it out, and we saw that come to a climax here in Game 3, where it seemed like every shot was geared towards the 5-hole. They made an effort to shoot there because either one is going to go in, or two, there's a good chance that it might generate a big rebound in front of the net where someone could jam it in. And we saw that in Game 3. We saw that in Game 4 also, where the initial shot went off the stick and then the rebound went in past his glove. This is not a secret here. The Bruins have sort of nailed down that Binnington is not good when it comes to pucks low and near his stick. So, but yet through that, Binnington has been great, right? In this series, and I mentioned this earlier in the first half of the show, Marchand, the Bruins' top line of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak. Marchand has 1 goal and 3 points in this series. Bergeron has 1 goal and 4 points. Pastrnak has, again, 1 goal and just 2 points. But St. Louis's top line with O'Reilly, he's got 3 goals and 6 points. Tarasenko has 3 goals. Schwartz doesn't have a goal, but he has 2 points. So in terms of the top line, the big names coming through, it seems, at least on paper, that and from the eye test also, that St. Louis's big names are coming through when they need it the most. For Boston, it almost seems like St. Louis is doing a phenomenal job of shutting them down. But the bottom lines, especially the fourth line of Boston, they are seemingly demolishing St. Louis's fourth line, and they have been finding a lot of ways to generate offense. But in terms of the big names, they've been, at least from what I've seen, I could be wrong about this, I don't know the analytics to this right now, but from what I've seen at least, it seems to me that St. Louis has done a phenomenal job of shutting down the big names for the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, they really have. Their 5-on-5 play, like I said, it's phenomenal, especially in the last 5 games. You said Marchand, he had a goal. Let's not forget that was an empty netter. And also, even strength points before the season or the series even started, you had Marchand with 10, Bergeron had 7, Pasternak had 9, Backes 5, and Krejci 11. And the Stanley Cup final, they all combined for 0 points at even strength right now. So to me, that's the biggest story right now, is just the Blues' overall structure and play. I tweeted out a video, I think it was 2 days ago. It's just a 3-minute span. There's no goal, nothing crazy like that, but it's just a 3-minute span of just hard-nosed, a forecheck that's going wild. The crowd's going crazy for every single hit, whether it's big or not. It was just amazing to watch, because they absolutely dominated the Bruins for a legit 3 full minutes in their own zone. And the Bruins even got out to the neutral zone like twice. And they were even able to get about 4 players off the ice. I believe there was 1 defenseman that was left out there the entire time. But the Blues made a full change. The Tarasenko, Schwartz, Shane line came out. They came out flying. They generated a couple of chances. And then it obviously led to that Tarasenko call in the corner, which, again, missed call. He kind of embellished it. And if you're looking back on the replay, he didn't really get hit. So that's another missed call. Another story to this Stanley Cup final. The refs just insanely bad so far.
This is the final, right? And Matt and I talked about this in the first half, but Matt said, and I totally agree with him, that this is the Super Bowl for the NHL. This is the best of the best that the NHL could offer. And you think about that and you go, really? This is the best that we've got? I mean, this refereeing right now that we are seeing in the Stanley Cup final should, in theory, be the best referees in the entire world, in theory. And yet we are seeing countless missed calls, countless just bad officiating. And it begs the question, right? Like, if this is the best thing that this sport has got, how is this, one, going to attract new fans to this sport? Because if the officiating is this bad, well, then we got a problem. And 2, it's not great for the sport in general, even with fans that have been a part of the sport for a while now, even with old fans, even with the players, the organizations. This is not good for the sport of hockey when supposedly your best referees are this bad. It's not good for the sport. It's not good for the past, present, future of the sport when your Stanley Cup final is being officiated as poorly as it was in Game 5.
Yeah, the officiating in this series is just, I thought heading into this Cup final that they would definitely tighten up and get the right crews out there and make the right calls. Obviously, you're going to have your missed calls here and there. I mean, they're humans. They're not robots. They're going to human error, missed calls, But, like, looking back to that West Conference final, that hand pass, how on earth do you miss something that blatant, that clear, let alone in overtime, that leads to the game-winning goal? And, like, that one I was mind blown about. But the Bozak chip on Achari in Game 5, that one that's almost just as bad if it was in overtime. But again, it led to the David Perron goal, which was a questionable goal let in by Tuukka Rask. Let's not forget, which Perron did get him back for, because earlier in the first period on the power play, he had a fantastic one-timer on the corner with a nice pass from O'Reilly. Tuukka absolutely robbed him, so Perron kind of got him back there with the softie. But yeah, officiating has definitely been a main topic in these playoffs, and now it's starting to be the main topic in the Cup final, which isn't a good look, but it's been good hockey played as well. So you gotta get what you can get.
For sure, and Binnington, besides Game 3, has been playing very well, played fantastically in Game 5, stopped 38 of 39 shots, leads me to my poll question for this week. I mentioned with Matt, and I want your opinion on this as well. Who is your pick to win the Conn Smythe Trophy? The four choices are Ryan O'Reilly, Jordan Binnington, Tuukka Rask, and Brad Marchand. Now, again, Twitter only lets me put four names down. So I got some replies here that I'm going to mention in a second here that we're angry about. What about this player? What about that player? Well, again, only got four options maximum, and I wanted to pick two from each team. So maybe relax a little bit on the replies. Maybe tone it down a little bit. Again, there's only so much room that Twitter gives you on these polls. So I don't know what to tell you. But of these four, Joey, in your opinion, which of these do you think is your pick to win the Conn Smythe?
Now, obviously, if the Bruins somehow find a way to win Game 6 in St. Louis, then win it in Game 7 to win the Cup. Hands down, it's Tuukka Rask. There's not even a question in my opinion. But on the Blues side of things, this is where it gets interesting. Right now, it's a four-horse race, basically. You got O'Reilly, Schwartz, Tarasenko, and Binnington. And some could say a dark horse is Pietrangelo. But of the names that you gave me with Binnington and O'Reilly, I just don't know. If I had to pick of those two players today, right now, I would have to go Ryan O'Reilly. But like I said, it's pretty much a four-horse race, and it's gonna come down to Game 6 and a potential Game 7. Whoever comes to play in those two games, I think, is gonna come away with it, no matter what they did the rest of the playoffs, because that's how wide open it is, in my opinion. My official prediction of the series was Blues in 6 in overtime, and I had the goal scored by Vladimir Tarasenko. So if I had my official prediction and say, I think we're going to see Vladimir Tarasenko play one of the best games of his career come Sunday, because that guy has said since day one, the day he's been drafted, his number one goal is to bring a cup to St. Louis. He said it in the bad times, he said it in the good times, and the man has stood by his word the entire time. And arguably, he hasn't really been playing well throughout these playoffs, or I wouldn't say well, but he has been consistent, especially at even strength, which is odd because that's usually when he's at his strength. But when push comes to shove, come the Stanley Cup final, he just came to play. Like you said, he has 3 goals. He had like a 8-game point streak coming into the series, and I think ending in Game 6 of the Sharks series, I believe. But that would be my official pick to win the Conn Smythe if the Blues did win it, would be Tarasenko, because I think he's going to come to play on Sunday, let alone his 16 points in 24 games already.
This doesn't happen often. This is rare, but sometimes the someone on the losers team would win. It's rare. It doesn't happen often. But the thing is, it's so hard because there's so many different great options to win the Conn Smythe, and in the end, it doesn't really matter. Right, it doesn't truly, I guess, matter, but it highlights how great these playoffs have been, because there's so many different names from both teams that could potentially win the Conn Smythe. And you mentioned a few. Tuukka Rask could win for the Bruins. Brad Marchand could win for the Bruins. Charlie Coyle could win for the Bruins.
Yeah, Coyle's had a very nice playoffs.
The poll got 530 votes here, but it's suffering from ridiculous recency bias, and I'll say why. And I can just see why because of the results here. Jordan Binnington is in the lead with 48% of the vote. Ryan O'Reilly is second with 34% of the vote. Tuukka Rask is third with 18% of the vote, and this shocked me when I first saw it with Matt, and this has been consistent now talking to you. Brad Marchand has 0% of the vote. Now, the Conn Smythe Trophy, now I don't know if you know this or not, Joey, I'm sure you do. The Conn Smythe Trophy is handed out for the best player of the playoffs, not the best player of the final. To give Brad Marchand 0% of the vote this is not a secret or anything. It's not good. Right. It's not a good look for the voters. Now again, this poll is skewed because the Blues are up 3-2 in the series. If this was tied at 2, and if the game was tonight or what have you, or if it was a game 7 or whatever, then I feel like this poll would have shown different results. But due to the recency bias of last night's win, where Marchand didn't score a goal, Tuukka Rask gave up that bad second goal in the third period, Binnington played well, O'Reilly played well. Because of that, I feel like this poll is super skewed. But there's people that are attacking the poll like it owes them money. Even one person at JKJ0787, Jordan Johnson, said, "Marchand, you kidding me, buddy? Listen, Marchand has been one of the best players in the playoffs." I don't. Some of these. There's a lot of responses about Tarasenko at cave_SCG. Tarasenko deserves to be in the discussion. At Anarchy Motive said Tarasenko, he elevated in the Stanley Cup final. He's been great at both ends of the ice, and they have perfectly reasonable points. You know what I mean? Tarasenko has been fantastic. One person at Nicholas Hardim or Hardem, I'm not sure. He said, "Are the refs an option?" Which is fair because they have been awful for both sides. The Blues got lucky in last night's game because of the refs, but again, we don't know if it was called fairly. We don't know if Boston would have won that game anyway because they were so bad for stretches of that game. And a couple of responses vying for Jordan Binnington at Philadelphia35 said, "If the Blues win, there's a 0% chance Binnington doesn't win it." And again, a lot of these responses have great points. Maybe not the Marchand one, but most of these ones have great points. So I it's tough to argue.
It is. It's really is wide open on the Blues side of things. But I do see your point with the Marchand thing. I think if it does come down to the Blues, for instance, if it's Binnington as your Conn Smythe winner, I think he has to have a 1-2 goal performance in Game 6. Like he has to be on his game. If he, like the one tweeter said, if he plays like he did in Game 5, in Game 6, I think then okay, give it to Binnington. However, I'm not sure about it. He has a 2.46 goal against average and 913 save percentage in the playoffs. He's been good. He's been great at times. He's also been soft at times, but no one's ever going to be perfect unless you're Tuukka Rask coming into the Stanley Cup final, obviously. Tuukka was on an absolute tear coming into the final, and then the Blues kind of figured him out in a way. I wouldn't say they necessarily figured him out, but they made him look human at times, you know. I see the Marchand argument for sure, but I really think this comes down to O'Reilly, Schwartz, and Tarasenko. In the bottom of my heart, I really do. I think, even though I know, like you said, it's throughout the entirety of the playoffs, which still O'Reilly with 20 points in 24 games, Schwartz 18 and 24, Tarasenko was 16 and 24, including 11 goals. They've been consistent, but I do think since the race is so wide open from a Blues perspective, I think whoever comes up to play, whoever game-winning goals or overtime-winning goals, whatever's going to happen throughout the next game, possibly two, is going to be your winner, in my opinion. But I definitely see the arguments of Rask. Now, going back to what you said with the losing team getting the Conn Smythe, if Rask were to play in the Stanley Cup final like he played throughout the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and these have all been 2-1, 3-2 type games, and the Blues are up 3-2 at this point in time, then you got to seriously consider Tuukka Rask as your Conn Smythe winner, even though the Blues win the Cup, because he'd be on such a tear. He had under 2 goals against average coming into the Cup final, I'm pretty sure. That's just unheard of. Like that's like Ben Bishop with the Dallas Stars in round 2. Like the Blues literally could not figure him out for 80% of that series. So I don't think we see that now that the Blues have kind of humanized Rask's performance, but I definitely think if it's a Blues perspective, it's between O'Reilly, Schwartz, and Tarasenko, unless Binnington stands on his head in Game 6. And then from a Bruins perspective, I see the Marchand argument. I would see a Bergeron argument as well, because as he goes, they go in a way. but I definitely think the sole leader for the Bruins would be Tuukka Rask for sure.
I saw this tweet last night. I want to bring this up. The most recent goalies pulled in the Stanley Cup final in this decade, no team that has pulled their starting goaltender in the final has won the series. In 2010, Michael Leighton was pulled twice in Game 1 and Game 5 in 2010. Luongo was pulled twice in 2011, Game 4 and Game 6. Ben Bishop was pulled in Game 2 of the 2015 series. Pekka Rinne was pulled twice in Game 2 and in Game 5 in 2017. And now Jordan Binnington got pulled in Game 3 of this series. And the Blues could become the first team this decade. This is the most irrelevant stat. It's so relevant. It doesn't mean anything besides it just being cool, right? It's just an interesting little tidbit of information. But the Blues could be the first team in this decade to pull their starting goaltender in a series in the Cup final and still win the series. So again, this is super irrelevant in the whole scheme of things. It's not related in any way, shape, or form, but it's an interesting stat that will be shattered if the Blues can hold out in Game 6 or in Game 7 and win the Cup for the first time in its history.
I like that because it plays into the whole Blues storyline of the season. I mean, January 3rd, your last place in NHL, everyone's already looking forward to the draft lottery, not even considering the playoffs at this point. And then they storm back. They got the long winning streak, the franchise record winning streak. They keep going. Obviously, we all know the whole story after that. But that stat of the goalie being pulled, no team has gone on to win the Cup after that. That's an interesting fact because it plays into that storyline as well.
Game 6 is Sunday, not Saturday. I tweeted out it was going to be on Saturday. It was a long day. I'm sorry. It was a long day. Give me some slack here. Should have quadruple checked, but I thought it was Saturday, so my fault. I got I got a couple of responses. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, it was a long day. What do you want me to do? Twitter needs an edit button. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. I didn't want to delete the tweet and then repost it because you already shared it and Matt already shared it. I'm like, I'm not reposting the same thing. I'll let it be. Let it. You know, I'll be wrong. I'll admit when I'm wrong, and I was wrong that the Game 6 is on Sunday, not Saturday. But in your completely obviously unbiased opinion here, Game 6 final score.
Before I get to the final score, let me tell you that this is such a unpredictable performance by the Blues that it's not even funny. Let's flash back to Game 3, first Stanley Cup at home in 49 years. The city is going absolutely wild. I mean, I was downtown from 10 a.m. on all the way out throughout the night, and that city was rocking the entire way. When times get high like that, the Blues can seem to fold under pressure. Looking back to the San Jose series, the Dallas series, whenever they're up 1-0 going into Game 2, looking like we're just going to absolutely demolish them, they choke in Game 2 and get beat pretty bad at home. And then looking back to round 1, this is the perfect example here. A lot of people are counting out the Blues against the Jets in round 1, and they go up into Winnipeg. They win 2 straight. No one saw that coming. They come home with all the hype, all the this is the year type attitude, and then bam, they drop 2 at home. So it's almost like when the pressure rises, like it will be on Sunday, which is going to be a new altitude of pressure, obviously. They have failed. I'm not going to lie about that. That's something I am a little bit nervous about. But on the flip side of things, in clinching games, this team is something I've never seen in my lifetime of the St. Louis Blues. Jordan Binnington in games 5 through 7 has a 7-1 record. He in potential series clinching games, he's 3-0 with a .947 save percentage and a 1.33 goal against average. So the guy is an absolute brick wall when it comes to potential series clinching games. That I'm not worried about. I think Binnington's going to have a phenomenal game. I'm worried about the offense. I'm worried about the defense getting lackadaisical at times. The Bruins offense waking up and just who knows what could happen. I do think the Blues are going to come out I think it's so tough. I think we're going to see back and forth first period, but I do end up seeing the Blues win, obviously in overtime, like my prediction. I think we're going to see a 3-2 game with Tarasenko scoring the overtime winning goal in Game 6 to have the Blues win the Stanley Cup.
Wow. I think I saw this. I'm not sure if I'm misquoting this or not, but teams, they haven't won the Cup on home ice very often.
Right.
Recently. So the Blues, once again, on the subject of things that are unlikely, the Blues are just checking off all these boxes here. One more to check off. Teams are, for some reason, more likely to win not at home, away from their home arena, than at home. At least that's what recent results have suggested. Now, the Blues, let's check this one last box off of the Blues doing something unlikely and pulling it out and pulling it off. So there's so many things that the Blues have done well in, and here we are. Game 5 last night, controversial to say the least. It led to some fighting in the crowd. I don't know if you saw those videos on social media. Bruins fans were fighting each other, throwing haymakers out, and in the seats, throwing beverages at each other. It was a wild scene, and it was surprising to me that it wasn't Blues versus Bruins fans. To my knowledge, from the videos that I've seen. It was all Bruins versus Bruins fans, but it's in any case, even if it's Bruins on Bruins, Bruins on Blues. I mean, you shouldn't. You paid so much money. You paid a lot of money to be at a Cup final game. Probably not the best idea to be throwing haymakers at other fans in Game 5 of the Cup final. That's just me. I mean, I don't know. I don't have $1,000 at my disposal to just waste on a ticket and then be thrown out in the middle of a game. That's me. That's just me personally. I don't know about these fans or what they got going on for themselves. But personally, probably I wouldn't be doing that.
There was actually one altercation of Bruins and Blues fans during the game. It was after the original video that you're talking about. I think the two Bruins guys going at it, but there was some Bruins and Blues fans going at it, fisticuffs right in the building. Looked like some old time hockey right there. I like to see that, but you don't like to see it at the same time. You know what I mean? But going back to I want to make one more prediction. I like to do the first goal of the game. I think like 1 for 5 on it this postseason. I just like to do it, but I think. You could call him a secret weapon in a way, but Zach Sanford, he was inserted into the lineup on the fourth line whenever Sundqvist was suspended in Game 3. And he's been in the lineup for 3 games. He's got 3 assists, 6 shots, 10 hits. He's a big guy, 6'4", 210, and he's actually from Salem, Massachusetts, which is about 45 minutes away from Boston. He went to Boston College, and the whole 9 yards. He's a hometown guy in Boston, right? I think that's going to be the first goal scorer of Game 6 is Zach Sanford. Most likely from a Rhino Rally assist.
Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Zach Sanford, the opening goal, and Vladdy Tarasenko, the series clincher. Joey, this has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, to be honest with you, Game 6, this could either end in a 1-0 game or a 9-4 complete blitzkrieg of just offense. At this point, we've seen a little bit of both. And I don't even know. I do think the Bruins, in terms of the pressure that they're going to put on, at least in the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes, they will be the dominating force, and it's up to St. Louis to withstand that. And if they don't, well, we're going to see a repeat of Game 3. And if they do, well, it's going to be a tight game. So it's going to be super tight. I do think, and Matt talked about this earlier on in the episode, that this is probably going to be the tightest called game in the series. And if that's if that comes to fruition, well, then this game is going to be won on the man advantage. And if if Boston's Game 5 man advantage unit comes back on the ice, well, then they're not going to get much done. But if their Game 3 man advantage comes out on the ice, well, then they're going to win the game. So there's so many factors here that could change the way this game is played and won. I would love to see St. Louis win on home ice, first cup in their history. St. Louis would go berserk. The state Missouri would go berserk. Everyone would go crazy. I think Boston's going to win this game. I'll say 4-2 on this one. I don't know. I mean, we could. I think Charlie Coyle's going to have a goal. I think Coyle has 9 goals so far in this playoff run. He's been one of their best players, one of the most consistent scorers. I think Coyle gets a goal. I think Marchand gets one. I think DeBrusque might get one. He's been super cold. He's been real. He's been probably one of the worst forwards for the Bruins in this series. I think he finally gets one to go, and I think Boston takes Game 6 on the road and then pushed it to Game 7 at TD Garden. But again, there's so many things that hinge on this game that it's tough to predict. It's I would love to see St. Louis win on home ice, but with the way Game 5 ended, I would have to assume that Boston comes out all guns blazing and put a few behind Jordan Binnington. At least that's my prediction. That would be my assumption going to Game 6. And in Game 7, obviously you're a Blues fan, Matt's a Bruins fan, but as a fan of neither team, nothing's better than a Game 7 of a Cup final when you're not a fan of the teams playing in the Cup final.
Yeah, I can't even imagine a Game 7. I honestly cannot. But I just want to say the atmosphere in St. Louis right now is absolutely unbelievable. The hype is so high. The anticipation is it's been 52 years. Never won one cup, never won a single cup game until this year. You got your national anthem singer, Charles Glenn, who's phenomenal, by the way. He's been singing it for 19 years for the Blues. He announced his retirement earlier this year. The Blues brought it all the way to the very last possible home game for him to win it, which is a very special low-key story that's going on. You got Bobby Plager, played for the Blues for 11 years, lived in St. Louis the whole life after that. There's just so much that goes into it. Your Brett Holes, your alumni. I've had fans tweet at me saying they're flying from the Netherlands, Thailand, Russia, Canada, all across the country and the world, really. And it's something special. Like, it's a movie. It really feels like a movie. And not to mention Sunday's my birthday. Like, it's all of this stuff is just coming together into one, and we gotta wait to see the ending, but it's phenomenal. You got Jay Bouwmeester, who's an absolute Iron Man. He's a vet, NHL grizzled vet. He played a game high, which was another low-key stat. He played a game high 29 minutes and 8 seconds in a road Game 5. And a swing game like that at that age is just incredible, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned Colton Parayko yet. But, my God, that guy is a budding superstar, I promise you. That's going to be a name you're going to mention for the next 10 years, I promise you. Him and Jay Bouwmeester have been an absolute unit on the back end for the St. Louis Blues. And arguably one of the most low-key reasons why they're here right now is because of those two players on the back end.
Joey, I super appreciate taking the time. Happy early birthday. Obviously, it's not until Sunday with Game 6. I can't even imagine what kind of birthday you're going to have if they win. I hope you have good DDs and good friends around you, because that's going to be a wild time for you if they win on your birthday. Super appreciate you taking the time to hop on the show. Plug your social media, plug your website, and plug whatever else you want to talk about. The floor is yours, man.
Thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at Palazzola RTN. You can follow the Respect the Note Twitter account at Respect the Note. You can follow all the Respect the Note people with Thomas Welch, Josh Hyman, not Pat Maroon. He's kind of our hype guy. Good follow. Kevin Lorenz. We added a girl finally, Mo Girl Probs. She's a good addition to the team, we think. And then we even got a good graphic designer in Fairy Designs. We got a team finally. It took me about 4.5 years to finally find the right group and the right chemistry with people. And we got some special stuff coming with the podcast, Blue World Order. We're relaunching a store, selling shirts, merchandise, all kinds of stuff. We got a lot of things in store. We're going to have a bunch of watch parties coming up next season, all kinds of stuff. But I'm really looking forward to it next season. But Sunday is going to be special. I'm not going to lie. Got the hotels booked. Don't got to worry about a DD. It's all ready. We're ready. St. Louis is ready for it. We've been waiting 52 years.
Joey, happy early birthday. Enjoy it. Enjoy Game 6. Appreciate you coming on. I'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And this has been episode number 51 of Chel Squared, the big one. Episode number 52, the 1-year anniversary of the show, coming up next Friday. Won't give out too many details, but keep following on social media, on Twitter at Chel Squared, on Facebook at Chel Squared. Big announcement, big tease coming out real soon as to the 1-year anniversary of the show. Keep your eyes peeled. I'll talk to you next week.